Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than my normal how-to kind of videos. I'm just simply going to introduce you guys to a product or a part that was factory available on lots of Jeeps many years ago, and it's much stronger than what's out there and available on today's Jeeps. You can find them on Facebook Marketplace and various places on the internet for real cheap. So without further ado, click all those buttons that you guys normally do, and let's get to it. That's right, guys. Cheap.
And that's the one, Marvin. That's the silver tuna.
Old.
Always hanging out around those kinky strip bars. You know, the ones where the men take their clothes off?
Better than what's available today. Stronger, more durable. Huge amount of aftermarket support for various vehicles. This is the Dana 300 transfer case. The body of most transfer cases today are made out of cast aluminum. You can go with aftermarket transfer cases that are made out of billet aluminum, and they are much stronger than the cast aluminum stuff. But the thing with aluminum is that it saves weight, but it's very rigid. It's very stiff, especially when it's cast aluminum. So it doesn't like to bend or flex. And when it gets a little bit of pressure put on it, they crack. Cracked transfer cases are extremely popular in the Jeep world. You guys can Google search that and you'll just get post after post after post. The other thing about today's transfer cases is how they're actually constructed with a chain inside of them. Let's dive underneath war paint. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so this is the back of my transfer case here in war paint, and obviously that's the rear output to my rear drive shaft. Now this transfer case actually is made into two pieces and then bolted together all the way around. And there's basically a gear on this side and a gear on this side, which controls on the other side the front drive shaft, which you can see up there going to my front axle. So that gear, these two gears are connected together with a chain that goes all the way around them. Now guys, that chain is pretty thick. That's not like your standard typical bicycle chain. It's not even your standard typical motorcycle chain. It's a pretty big, thick, heavy duty chain, but under the stress that we put these vehicles under, the chain stretches and then you get a lot of slop in your transfer case. It's not long before it slips over the gears, stripping the teeth off. And then you basically need either a rebuilt transfer case, which is a lot of money, or you're going to go aftermarket, which is a ton of cash, right? You can pick up an Atlas transfer case for anywhere between $3,500 to $6,000, depending upon how you want to have it built. And that's a lot of money just for a transfer case. Now it comes with some benefits. They're extremely strong. You can select different gear ratios, and you can also get twin stick shifters, right? So for those of you that don't understand what that means, I'm going to talk about it in just a minute. But the Dana 300 over here gives you all that stuff for not a ton of cash at all. Now, the Dana 300 was found on Jeeps back in the CJ era. It's not aluminum. It's in fact made out of cast iron, so it's extremely strong. Even though cast iron is usually pretty heavy, because of its small size, it doesn't weigh much. It actually is comparable to the weight of today's aluminum transfer cases. But the cool thing about this transfer case is the fact that it doesn't have a chain, okay? This is the front output on this transfer case. That's your U-joint where your drive shaft would hook up. And on the other side, right over here, we have the rear. This would go toward your rear drive shaft to your rear axle. Again, we have the gear over here. We have a gear over here on the inside, but there's kind of like a planetary setup in between, which means there's absolutely no chain. This is just gear driven. That makes this transfer case fairly easy to rebuild. It makes this transfer case fairly easy to re-gear and change your gearing options. And it also makes this transfer case super strong because gears don't stretch like a chain does. The factory gear ratio that's most common in these is going to be a 2.7 to 1. Not the best gear ratio for rock crawling, but it's not bad. That's the same gear ratio that comes in the JK unless you have a Rubicon, right? Then it's a 4 to 1, and those gears are available for this as well, and you can even go steeper than that. Probably the coolest thing is the fact that you can operate the front output and rear output individually on this transfer case. That's right, guys. That means you're gonna have an extra shifter sticking up through your floor. For those of you that don't understand, let's hop in the JKU and I'll explain. Whether you have a manual or an automatic, you're obviously gonna have a shifter. So that's one. Then we have our shifter over here for the transfer case. Now this shifter controls whether the transfer case is in 2-wheel drive with just rear output engaged, 4-wheel drive with both outputs engaged, and then we have for high and then for low. The benefit of having that extra shifter coming through the floor, that would mean that we would have 2 shifters over here by the transfer case. Now those 2 shifters allow us to do something that's pretty cool and typically only available in aftermarket transfer cases. That allows you to operate the front axle independently from the rear axle. Now there's not a lot of situations where you'd want to do this, but it is nice to have that option, and people pay a lot of money for that option in the aftermarket world. Well, this transfer case allows you to do that from the factory for about 200 bucks. You can pick up that transfer case on Facebook, like I said, Marketplace, anything like that, for about $600. Basically change the fluid, maybe throw some bearings in it for a couple $100, and then at the end of the day, spend another $200, and you have the ability to control your axles independently. Now, you'd want to do that typically off-road on a trail where you're not lined up on the best line. Sometimes we get into obstacles and you want to move your front end over just a foot or so. Well, the nice thing about having a twin stick transfer case is you can put the rear axle in neutral so that no power is going to it. Keep your front axle in 4 low, hit the gas, and basically it'll pull your front end over whichever way you're steering the vehicle. Then re-engage your rear axle into 4 low, and away you go, right? So that's a really nice option rather than just backing down and reapproaching. Again, most people aren't going to use it. Heck, even the people that have it don't use it all that often, but it's nice when you need it, especially in a vehicle that doesn't turn all that well with big tires and big axles. So it's just a nice option, and to have it for so cheap in a transfer case that's so strong with so much aftermarket support, pretty cool. Before I leave you to go search the internet and scour all over the place to buy up all the Dana 300s you possibly can, the one drawback, okay, and I'm going to say drawback because it's not really a drawback and there is a fix, is that this transfer case is designed for a passenger drop front axle. You'll notice that the differential happens to be on the driver's side of the vehicle. But if you have an axle like this, right? This axle has the differential on the passenger side of the axle. Well, this transfer case is designed to come off the back of the transmission and kind of hang toward the passenger side to send that drive shaft to the passenger side front differential. Most differentials these days, most big axles that we swap into our rigs aren't passenger drop axles, they're driver drop. So there's a pretty cool company called Novak that you can look up on the internet. I'll link to it in the description. They make a flip kit for this transfer case that basically allows you to rotate it and make it a driver drop transfer case. It converts your shifter levers and everything else to work basically off the bottom of the transfer case, which is then the top because you flipped it, and it makes everything work perfectly. You can pick that kit up for about $800 and it includes the shifters. So guys, if you're suffering from a cracked transfer case, maybe you just want that fancy twin stick option, or you want to re-gear your transfer case to make it a little bit steeper, you can actually pick up these Dana 300s right here for about $2,000 completely rebuilt, or for a lot less on the internet used. And like I said, usually they're in really good shape still because they don't have the chain that wears, then causes all sorts of deflection on the input and output shafts and wears bearings. So they last a good long time, and they're super durable and strong. Compact in size. We talked about all the benefits. This is a transfer case that I highly recommend. That's why I'm going to be putting it behind the V8 powered CJ rock crawler that I'm building on this channel.